Mark Bergin, Luis Fernandez here for another edition of Double Duty here on WRAL Triangle and Two and the WRAL Daily Download. Luis, the NCAA Tournament is getting underway this week. We've got two Triangle teams in on the men's side, a ton of games at the Lenovo Center. But I thought, what better way to welcome in the tournament to talk about the top storylines going in as March Madness gets underway.
And we got plenty of top storylines to talk about, especially when, you look at just all the action that's going to be in the triangle of the, hold on, math really quick, 136 teams that play on the men's and women's NCAA tournaments. 20 of them are going to be here in the triangle area. So really cool stuff. Let's get started, Mark.
All right. And kicking off what I'm going to call the Duke Invitational, Luis, is the return of Cooper Flagg. Had that ankle injury in the ACC tournament, missed the semifinal game and the final. He'll be back. And head coach Jon Scheyer says the plan is to get him back Friday. A couple of thoughts I have here, Luis. Number one, Duke playing on Friday, I think, is to the team's benefit in that Flagg has another day of rest and recovery and rehab. But then number two, depending on which 16 seed Duke plays, even if Flagg's unable to play on Friday, if he's ready to roll by Sunday's game in the second round, I think this bodes well. But the do-it-all player for Duke, led Duke in pretty much every statistical category, ACC Player of the Year, perhaps the National Player of the Year. Getting him back and seeing him play in March is on the forefront of a lot of college basketball fans' minds, Luis.
No, agreed. And it was very scary, honestly, when he went down in the ACC tournament, because those moments you're never really sure how serious it's going to be. But fortunately, throughout the course of the weekend and into Selection Sunday, Jon Scheyer continued to emphasize, our plan is to get him back by Friday. Things are trending positively. They are taking the utmost care with his rehab process for his sprained ankle. So that will be important. Flagg's athleticism is such a big part of his game, so you want to see just how good he will be. We'll get a chance to watch him practice on Thursday, hypothetically, if he is indeed practicing. The Lenovo Center teams, the teams that are playing here in Raleigh, will have open practices throughout the course of that day. So that's going to be something to watch for. He's, like you said, potentially the National Player of the Year. If Cooper Flagg is healthy enough or completely healthy for the run that does, it changes Duke's prospects so much. Although we saw them win an ACC tournament championship even without him, that team is just very good from top to bottom.
He's going to be the number one pick in the NBA draft. And if you're a college basketball fan, Luis, we have been so lucky and fortunate because he's been as advertised.
Yes.
And there's a lot of hype coming into this year of the Gatorade Player of the Year and the guy who's expected to be the top pick this coming June. He has been terrific. I mean, he leads Duke points, rebounds, assists, blocks, steals. He is a do-it-all player for the Duke Blue Devils. We will talk more about his teammates here on the show, but I think a lot of people are going to be giving him his flowers, and rightfully so. And selfishly, as a college basketball fan, I want to watch him play when it matters most in March during the NCAA tournament.
Absolutely.
All right. Do you want to go to the next pick? And this is where I think we're going to have a little bit of a disagreement, is why Auburn got the number one overall seed over the Duke Blue Devils in the NCAA tournament. Luis, you explained this to me off the air when we're at the WRAL studios, but I have arguments for both. But if you can explain and make the case for why Auburn got the number one overall seed over Duke.
Yeah, it's a full body of work. Auburn did not finish the season strong. They lost, I think it was 3 games over the last 4 or 5. But they, for the majority of this season, have been the best team in the country. They did lose to Duke by a few points at home at Cameron Indoor Stadium at the very beginning of December. But Auburn, time in and time out, has proven that they are the best team in the country. they had played incredibly well, dominated during sometimes the best conference in college basketball in the SEC. Like I said, they fell a little bit down the stretch, but Janai Broome is another player who's going to be right up there with Cooper Flagg for National Player of the Year. The number one overall seed is a full body of work, and I think Auburn's full body of work pushes them over the edge. But I mean, once again, this is Auburn's the one seed, the overall, and Duke is the second one seed. Like, this is not, I would say, disrespect to Duke or anything like that. But I think Auburn's full body of work puts them in this position.
I'm curious if the Duke players use that as motivation at any point during the tournament, Lewis, knowing how athletes think and work. You mentioned Auburn's overall body of work, a 28-5 record, 16-5 against quad one teams. Duke went 9-3 against quad one teams. So a greater strength of schedule for Auburn overall based on the matchups, because the last ranked team that Duke played and beat this season was against Auburn all the way back in early December. It's been a long time for Duke, and that's something we'll get to, is how the ACC has been down this year. But in Duke's case, in making the argument on behalf of Duke, I said this on last week's pod. I'll regurgitate this stat again because it's incredible. It's the point differential, plus 434 in point differential in ACC play. That's the largest by a power conference team in league play since Kentucky, dating back to 1953 and 1954. And so I look at that. You also mentioned Auburn losing 3 of its last 4 games. I'm just a bit surprised that there's not more of a conversation about how Duke was more deserving than Auburn was. Not talking about their full body of work, because Duke can't control how good the other teams that they play. I mean, the non-conference, yes, but the conference play, that's out of Duke's control. I'm just surprised there's not more of an argument saying, hey, no. Duke was actually the team that deserved the number one overall seed in this year's NCAA tournament. I don't really understand why there's not more of an argument for that.
Yeah, I do think the conference comes into it, right? Like, the ACC just was not it this year.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can even make the argument that a team like Florida might deserve the number one overall seed. So there are, what Duke has done is incredibly impressive. However, I just, Auburn, for the vast majority of the season, was one of the best teams, if not the best team in the country, in the hardest conference in college basketball this season. And I think that's what it boils down to.
I will say one other thing. There's not been a team in the history of the NCAA tournament that has lost 3 of its last 4 games going into the tournament that has then gone on to win the tournament. So I'm just putting that out there. If you're an Auburn fan, I would be a little bit wary of how the Tigers finished down the stretch of this season. Again, I would also use that in my argument if I were arguing on behalf of Duke being the number one overall team. But that's a perfect segue and perfect transition to our next topic, is all the talented teams that we're going to see at the Lenovo Center this weekend. We mentioned Duke, we talked about Cooper Flagg, but it's not just Cooper Flagg as we saw in the semifinal and final of the ACC tournament. Con Knipple has been terrific. Tyrese Proctor, a junior guard, veteran presence there. You also have Kamen Malawach, the big guy for the Duke Blue Devils. So they aren't just Cooper Flagg and company. One thing with Flagg, too, if he's able to move around like he's normally able to, we mentioned the prolific offensive ability and everything he can do, but with Flagg on the floor and the length that he provides, Duke's ability to switch they're able to do that 1 through 4, maybe even 1 through 5 with how fluid Malawach is, both inside, outside, protecting the hoop. So you got Duke at Lenovo Center this weekend. That's certainly exciting. You mentioned Florida. So we've got 2 number 1 seeds in our backyard. And then you got UConn, the back-to-back national champions. Oh, by the way, just an 8 seed this year. It's going to be a lot of talent in Raleigh this weekend at the Lenovo Center. So that's also one of my top storylines for the tournament.
Yeah, a lot of talent, a lot of really fun just teams in general. Whether you look at playing style, whether you look at like you said, the talent that they have. There's some really interesting matchups. Mississippi State and Baylor. Like, I think that's a really fun kind of group there. You mentioned the Duke storylines, right? Jeremy Roach, the longtime guard for the Blue Devils, who transferred at the end of last season. He's now at Baylor. If Baylor wins and Duke wins, then you're looking at a kind of rematch of sorts there. I think that's super fascinating. The Florida one is really exciting for me. I really like Florida. They have played really well down the stretch. They beat Auburn, what was it, twice this season? So I mean, they're very talented. It's gonna be cool to watch them play. UConn. I mean, Dan Hurley is Dan Hurley. The head coach he's got a lot of personality, and so you're getting a chance to watch that group. Even though they may not be, up to the talent level that we're used to, in the past 2 years where they won the national championship, you've still got them versus Oklahoma. So a couple of SEC teams as well. I think it's going to be a very exciting pod, a very exciting group of teams to watch in the Lenovo Center. It's just, you get a little lucky sometimes, with how this works out. Like I said, if you are a college basketball fan, this week in the Triangle is just going to be bliss. It's going to be awesome.
All time. And I'll get to some players to watch here at Lenovo this weekend. But if you're a college basketball fan, you were watching that UConn game, just watch Dan Hurley on the sidelines, the UConn head coach. It's very animated. I was going to use the word maniac, maybe menace, but he's very mercurial on the sidelines for UConn. Yep. Very, very animated, but certainly he's had as much success as you can, back-to-back national champs. He's fun to watch. There's going to be a camera on him at all times throughout this whole weekend.
Yes. It's maniac's a good word for it. You'll get your money's worth. I'll put it that way.
All right. UConn, not the same defensive team that we've seen in the back-to-back champs. But this year they can still put the ball in the hoop. They have, 3 players in double-digit scoring. Solo Ball, their guard, Liam McNeely, and then Alex Caravan as well. So 3 players to watch for UConn. You mentioned Florida, Lewis. Walter Clayton Jr., an all-SEC guard, averaging more than 17 per game. He's been awfully good for the Gators as well. So some players to watch. We're going to get to Jeremy Roach here a little bit. I have some thoughts about that in a potential second round matchup against the Duke Blue Devils as well. But I'll land here, Lewis. I know how legitimate this is of how sacred college basketball is to the Triangle. But when I see that CBS is sending its A crew with Ian Eagle, Bill Raftery, Grant Hill, Tracy Wolfson, they're sending their A team to cover the tournament here. They didn't send any of the other crews, and it's no knock on the other broadcasters of part of Turner Sports. But when they're sending the best of the best, the crew that's going to be announcing the national championship game, that to me shows you how much talent there is here this weekend in Raleigh.
Agreed. Couldn't have said it better myself.
I got one other thing too, and I found this stat to just be absolutely incredible. Teams playing in Raleigh this weekend have combined to win 14 national championships since 1991, including 3 of the last 4.
Pretty good.
Yeah. Speaking of talent or lack thereof, the ACC only getting 4 teams into the tournament. Duke, Clemson, Louisville, UNC. I think it's interesting that those 4 teams are also the top spenders in the ACC when it comes to NIL, but the ACC is down right now, Lewis, especially compared to other conferences. I look at the SEC. The SEC got 14 teams into this year's tournament, which is a record for a single conference. What are your thoughts about the ACC only getting 4 in?
Well, I think that it's some of it I think is a marketing problem, right? Like, Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, he is everywhere doing whatever he needs to say to talk up the SEC, talking about how they need 14 teams and all this stuff, right? But Brian Murphy, WRAL Sports investigative reporter, had a really good article this weekend, kind of assessing the situation with the ACC. And it's just the basketball. Like, the basketball is not good. It is not up to standard. Whether it be bringing in the high flying recruits, whether that be bringing in, the big time transfers, players leaving the ACC. I think the ACC has just kind of been behind the eight ball. You've seen, I think, Duke react quickly when you came to just the changing of the college basketball landscape, whether that be hiring a general manager, whether that be their recruiting process and how they go about forming teams. I think that they kind of figured it out. And then it feels like a lot of other teams they're just now starting to get it. Even the teams that were incredibly successful in the ACC this year, I don't think they got the recognition they deserved. Louisville being an 8 seed is ridiculous. Like, that is Louisville went 18-2 in conference play. They were I think they finished as a top 10 team in the AP poll. They're a top 25 team on just about all metrics that you could look at, whether that be net or Ken Palm or Bart Torvik or Wob or whatever it might be. And they are an 8 seed and have to play Creighton in the first. I mean, it's just disrespectful. So I think it's a combination of that kind of like the outside looking in, the looks of the conference. And I think the conference has to be better. They have to adjust in the times. But this is not the ACC of old. They just barely got 4 teams in too, because UNC snuck in at the very end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's revenue, and it's keeping up with the Joneses, not just the other teams in your conference, but the SEC and the Big Ten. And I thought this was most telling is when Dick Vitale was on the ESPN broadcast and calling on the ACC to adapt with the times of modern college sports. And this was his direct quote. He says, quote, "This league's got to do a better job of handling the NIL and the transfer portal and get stronger. This conference for years was the best. And I'm telling you right now, it has taken a real hit," end quote. If Dickie V is saying that, and he's probably as big of advocate as you could find for the ACC and for ACC basketball, to me, that's very telling. And I would also encourage anyone listening to this or watching to this, go check out Murph's story over at WRAL.com.
Yeah. And one thing too, just to throw out there as well, some of it's the coaching, right? You lost so many Hall of Famers over the past few years. And if not Hall of Famers, Hall of Fame adjacent coaches. Right now, before the NCAA tournament gets started, the only coach in the ACC right now that has been to the Final Four is Hubert Davis with UNC. That's it. So, that could change this year. John Shire and Duke could get to the Final Four very easily, but that's not the kind of experience you want in your conference. And I think there's just been a lot of changing of the guard, both from a coaching perspective and from just how basketball operates perspective. And the ACC has to catch up.
Yeah, in recent years, Coach K, Roy Williams at Syracuse, Jim Boeheim. I mean, we could go through the list, but that's also included in Murph's piece, so go check that out. Louis, you mentioned it briefly, a possible second-round matchup. Duke against former Blue Devil guard Jeremy Roach, played for the Blue Devils for several years. I'm also looking at this possibility of Duke matching up against Arizona in the Sweet 16. Mark, why are you talking about this? Caleb Love getting one last crack at the Blue Devils. Sign me up. I might be counting my chickens before they hatch. I dream about this matchup of a Duke-Arizona matchup in the Sweet 16, Louis. I want to see Roach go up against Duke in the second round, but Caleb Love getting one last shot at Duke. Sign me up, man.
The NCAA tournament always delivers, it feels like, when it comes to like the possible like drama-filled matchups and moments and things like that. And yeah, this is definitely one of them. For those that don't remember, Caleb Love, former UNC guard, he was the one that hit the 3 at the very end of the game that ultimately lifted the Tar Heels over Duke in the Final Four in Coach K's final game. So it's just juicy. That's what it kind of boils down to. The possible storylines. I'm curious to go talk to the players. This week, but even like from Duke's perspective, right? I'm sure a lot of them know who Jeremy Roach is, but that team's very new. They don't, those players don't really know Jeremy Roach like that. That's like Tyrese Proctor is a prime example of someone who's going to have that connection with him. Yeah, the Caleb Love thing I think is fun. There's a lot of potential. A Duke versus Alabama regional final, in the Elite Eight. I think that would be really fun too. Alabama's the 2 seed in their region if we were to get to that. It's the NCAA always somehow, I don't know how they do it. Somehow they always end up getting these kind of like drama-filled matchups.
Lewis, we could talk till sundown about all of this and stuff we did not get to. UNC getting into the tournament is the last at-large team in a play-in game on Tuesday night. 3 ACC women's teams here in the Triangle. NC State, UNC, Duke, hosting opening weekend games for the first time since 1998. And then also, whenever this comes to, because the transfer portal opens on Monday, March the 24th, might very well know who the next NC State men's basketball coach is. So we have a ton of coverage here, WRAL.com, WRALSportsFan.com, and then wherever you watch WRAL TV on your devices, TV, tablet, phone, it's all here, man. The madness is here. I cannot wait for Thursday, man. I cannot wait.
Yep, buckle up. Like I said, if you like college basketball in the Triangle, you can go to Cameron, you can go to Carmichael, you can go to Lenovo Center, you can go to Reynolds Coliseum. You're going to find high quality basketball just around every corner. It's going to be a really good weekend.
For Luis Fernandez, I'm Mark Bergin. Thanks for listening and watching WRAL Triangle and Two and the WRAL Daily Download. Enjoy the madness. We'll see you next week. Until then, take care and so long, everybody.